morning. I think we missed a week, so a lot to catch up on.
Yeah, that's. I don't think we missed a week. We recorded last week, didn't we?
No, no, I was out sailing. We did not. We did not.
Okay. How was the
Yeah.
sailing?
It was pretty good. It was sunny. I mean, it was like 5 degrees Celsius in the morning, but it was sunny, which makes it all pretty good. Good wind. We're all over the place, you know. I mean, we went all over the place. Not that the sailing was a mess, but no, it's good. It was really good. How about you? All going all right?
Busy, really, really busy at the moment. Big contract negotiations with some established clients, but that's all going well, and really seeing an uptick in the AR portion of our business. So having a lot of conversations
You're
with
welcome.
clients. Yeah, thank you. You know, it's the
Yeah,
genesis really was the early work that we did with that you and I did together. So we'll always be grateful around that.
sure. And we ain't done yet. When you say you're in major contract negotiation, I thought contract negotiations never ended. I thought they were perpetual.
Yeah, some of our retainer-based clients. So we've still got some legacy lines of business.
Yeah,
So we provide IT ops support for some major QSR brands. And those are typically 3 to 5 year agreements. And yeah,
yeah,
just big coffee brand, big global coffee brand is still our biggest client. So just
yeah.
concluded a 3 year extension to the contract with them.
Oh, very good. All right.
Yeah,
Well done, man. That's all
thank
good.
you.
Where should we start? Microsoft released their Q3 earnings. I think it was this morning, which I have gone through. If you want me to give you the top line,
Yeah, please.
so beat the exceeded expectation. This is Q3, so it's obviously an important quarter, but not the full thing. Revenue up 17% year on year, which is pretty phenomenal given headwinds everywhere else in the economy. 60, just under 62 billion in revenues. Analyst projection of so what is that? 60. Earnings per share 294. Analyst expectation 282. So that's very good. I said the stock was up about 5 points, maybe 418, something like that. It looks like a buy rating up into about $500 a share at the moment. From it seems to be consensus, which is good. Driven, no surprise, by Azure AI services, which I think you can read as Azure services plus AI.
Yeah.
But there's a few other things that I think their strategy is starting to really work. I think one thing that was interesting was let me find it now. They have a division. Sorry, let me just find this so I don't make a mistake of this. They've got a division which is called More Personal Computing, I think, and that showed significant growth as well. I'm just looking here. So that wasn't just all in the big Azure side of things that they were seeing growth. That on the personal computing side they were seeing growth, which they will attest to the AI products being baked into their suite of products, right?
Mhm.
So that it wasn't only big enterprise, but the individual was getting the upside from this as well. So very good. One thing I will call out is what also exceeded analyst expectation was the capital expenditure. So just for the quarter, it's quite amazing actually. So for the quarter, they were, I think it was maybe 9 billion capital expenditure out of a profit of, let's say, 20.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that capex, as we all know, is whatever the life cycle of whatever they're spending it on will be the amortization, right? Will be the time that will be that will hit their P&L. But it is interesting. It is interesting. Of almost half the cash that they generated, they spent. 40% of the cash they generated, they spent, all in big AI build out. The data center build out. But as I always say, capex is just your P&L looks good that year, and you can go spend all this money, but it's just deferred pain because this. I don't know what's the life cycle of these big data centers. Is it 5 years, 7 years, 10 at the max, right? Because it's such a and so there's such an improvement. So there is significant cost coming to the P&L with all of this capital expenditure. And they'll say they've been spending CapEx for a while, but not to this level. I mean, I don't have the numbers at hand, but I would assume not to this level. And so then the next obvious, step from there is this cost is coming to the Microsoft P&L, and they're not going to eat this cost. Like, this cost is coming to business, right? So unless the use case is really lined up and it's revenue generating and everybody knows exactly why they want these services, we're in this at the moment. All we're doing is we're creating cost. But where that additional revenue is coming from Microsoft now to an extent, but where is it really going to come in the future, right?
Yeah, look, we're definitely going through the buildings of some core infrastructure. I want to quickly just show you a slide that I put together for a client, which I think will give some clarity to what I mean here.
And while you do that, I'll just give you the full number. So their net income was 21.9 billion. Their capital expenditure was 14. So it's more than 40%, for the quarter. Their capital expenditure for the quarter before was 11 billion, and in the third quarter was 14 billion.
So, really what I did for some client analysis was, on what scale should we think about AI? And, really what we're looking at now is, the late 90s when the core internet started getting built out. And, what we saw was, Cisco was the predominant company building out the internet, and the market supported Cisco. Now, for whatever reasons, Cisco didn't capture as much of the market, and there was in 2000 the boom, the bust that happened, the internet bubble burst in 2000, and Cisco never really recovered from that because there were a whole lot of lower cost entry. But the reason I put this graph together is NVIDIA is going, what we're seeing with the NVIDIA share price is a very similar infrastructure build out. Now, when we think about, when I think about AI and I think about the different components of AI, we have NVIDIA who are making the GPUs. We then have the likes of Azure, who are the cloud providing platforms who consume that. And, we then have the applications on top of that. And, probably the two components that have quite big question marks around would be one layer lower, which are the power providers. Zuckerberg was on a podcast this last week, and the interviewer asked Mark Zuckerberg, what is beyond his CapEx, his ability to capitalize inside his business. And he said the one thing he would love to capitalize, but he doesn't have the funds for, is power. He would like to build power plants.
Yeah, which if he stopped spending all that money on the metaverse, I think he could probably fund a few nuclear power stations, because he got absolutely hammered again. Their share price got hammered, and that just, that division is just continuing to lose so much money, right?
Wait, it's over $40 billion. It's over $40 billion of R&D he's invested, and I think he will be right in the long term, but I think that what we're seeing is he was too soon to market. He's probably 3 years ahead of where he should be.
So what was the story there? Because it almost like he had said, okay, I get it, guys. I'm not going to, I get the metaverse is, we need to be a more disciplined company, and the metaverse is sucking up all of our resources. So I'm not going to, play around there, and we're going to get serious about everything else. But then it seems like that may not have been the case, because it just continued. And I mean, the share price got hammered, 15% on the day. I don't know what's happened to it subsequently. But it seems as if he may have indicated that he was becoming more attuned to what the market wanted from his business. But in reality, he has not given up on this.
It's definitely not. He's toned it down. And I do think it would be a mistake for him to give up on it. You know, I think that the Meta business is a good business. I think he's playing his hands tactically well with the architecture. So, you know, he's built his VR systems are built on top of Android as an operating system. So he's taken a fork of the Android open source operating system, and what he's now done is he's open sourced his fork. So
yes.
effectively, what that means is that third-party hardware manufacturers can use his operating system to run on his third parties. And then the other thing he's done is he started defensively buying a whole bunch of VR apps to exclude them from Apple. So he's definitely playing a good tactical game, but I think he's too far ahead of the market, and he's getting punished for that.
But I think the other thing that I would say is that, you know, with all of this money that's being spent, at some stage it has to something has to materialize from it, like a meaningful product, something that can be commercialized, monetized, like something has to come out of it. Because I mean, what has he spent on the metaverse to date?
Over $40 billion. So
no, wasn't that just recent? I mean, I thought that was more recently in total.
No, that was consolidated R&D spend.
Okay.
So
what does he have to show for 40 billion?
No, it's a proper number. You know, it's more than, you know, probably if you look at Tesla's R&D budget, you know, and they've got a profitable business. It's far more than Tesla's probably spent on a consolidated 10-year basis, and they have a profitable business. But you know what I'll do is I will steelman his case. So you know, if you think of the innovator's dilemma, dilemma is, you know, you've got a business, it's a profitable business, and you think that just polishing that business will be the future. And that's the reason why Xerox missed the internet boom. You know, that's the reason why Google's in the issues that it has, is because it's got this cash cow, it's focused on this cash cow. And Mark's a young CEO, and he's sitting in a position to say, well, you know, social isn't, you know, that the future of social, there is going to be an end to that being the predominant technology. And you know, am I going to take short to medium term pain in the market by investing heavily in the next wave, or am I just going to ride this cash cow into as long as I can?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. But I mean, that's fine, but your bets better work. You know what I mean?
Your bet's better. But either way, you know, if you think about it, it's a lose-lose situation. You know, you either the CEO of IBM during, you know, IBM's going down, and you're sitting there, or you the guy who's saying, I'm going to take a big swing at the next big technology. And he's too young. You know, in this interview, the interviewer asked him, why has he never sold the business? And he said, well, you know, I love solving problems. And if I had to sell this business, all I would do is create another business to solve problems. So why don't I just keep the business I've got? And I actually have a lot of respect for that. You know, the guy's doing what he's passionate about, and he's backing himself.
Yeah. I mean, he did sell parts of his business. So he's, you know, he's definitely unlocking some value.
He's definitely post money. You know, when he's buying islands in Hawaii to build his ranch, he's definitely post money.
Yeah, which is all crazy, by the way. That whole, you know, if it was all to go, you know, severely wrong, and I don't want to sidetrack the conversation with this, pick it up at another time, but if it was all to go severely wrong, I can promise you, like a what do you call it? A doomsday bunker in Hawaii is not going to solve the problem. You know, how are you going to get there? Like all manner of issues. And also, when people figure out that's where you're hiding, they're coming for you, bro. They're coming for you. And your Brazilian jiu-jitsu is not going to necessarily help. But it does seem a little bit like
Cape Town's not a bad place to be. You know, I kind of saw an infographic on all the nukes and where they pointed in that, and there were no nukes pointed at Africa.
Sure. Good for you, man. What I would say is it does look a little bit like a boy emperor who is a little self-indulgent in his R&D projects. Now, I'm sure that's probably too harsh and overstating it, but where's the governance, right? Because 40 billion, I mean, it's not even close. Like, are we seeing anything that's actually, and there's some demonstrations of technology that's good, but there's nothing that's giving us any indication that we're close to, that this is even close to being a product that the masses are interested in.
I don't, I actually think the Meta Ray-Ban product is a compelling product. I think we're 3 years away from it really being compelling. There are battery life issues. There are a whole bunch of issues, but he's recently put multimodal support in those Ray-Ban glasses. The other R&D work. So one of the things I wanted to chat to about today was Llama 3 showing up in WhatsApp and a lot of the platforms. Now, for me, that's a big deal. I've started, it's probably, if I had to look at myself, I probably stopped using Google about 50% since ChatGPT came out. And this week, I've almost exclusively used Llama 3 into WhatsApp. So, there's a shift around where people are consuming information.
Yeah, there is. And there's 2 points that I will make on that one. One, I always said that they were so well placed because they have all of these products that consumers are using. So you put AI into that, and you're already, it's like Microsoft putting it into Excel. You put it into Instagram where you already have some e-commerce happening there already. You put it in there, and then all of a sudden you've got the audience. They're already using it. The opportunities become the adjacent opportunities become very big, which is the first thing I'd say. The second is that Google sucks, right? And I don't mean that in its entirety in the business, but the search function, search function is
8 blue links is broken. It's SEO is broken it, advertising has broken it. The probability of you finding the best possible answer to your question is very close to 0.
Yeah, sure. But I think it's even worse than that. There's a fantastic article, which I'll send to you. So it's called, it's quite long. It's called "The Man Who Killed Google Search," right? And it is a scathing review in detail of a manager, junior exec who was given too much power. And basically, Google used to be, they were obsessive around the science of search, right? And it was there was sanctity around that, etc. And then over time, ad revenues were down, and they compromised search principles for revenue, right? And this happened in 2019. They called an emergency meeting because there's just been a big lawsuit, and so a whole lot of emails were made discoverable. And there's this full kind of timeline of what happened. And they called this meeting, and they said, we have this major problem with declining ad revenues, and we need to do something about it. And they have something that they call Code Orange, which is for a very weird reason why they have that. Is because one of the engineers used to wear an orange vest to work. Anyway, but basically what it meant is drop everything. This is priority number 1, right? So then they had this thing and decided what they were going to do, and then they all congratulated each other. This is going to be fantastic. And what they basically did is the ad revenue and the finance side took over search effectively and started to make the decisions for it. And one of the things that they did is, before, if it was a sponsored link, it was very big and you could see it was a different color, etc. And then it stopped doing that, and it looked like every single other link except for one very small 8-point probably bolded thing that just said ad. Because obviously it's a thumb on the scale, right? They're just trying to get people to click on it and so forth. And since then there's just been this degradation of their search function, right? And it's got worse and worse and worse. I mean, if you search something now, you get links to Reddit and all sorts of things, which like it's just so not useful. You've got to scroll through pages and pages to get to where you need to. Yeah. So I don't think that there's any love lost for the product at the moment. I think they've lost the product. And so when you can get something like ChatGPT that's going to bring you to an answer, we're on the way to a major disruption there.
Well, you know, in ChatGPT, and I agree with everything you've just said, but you know, ChatGPT, the friction on using ChatGPT was high, you know, and when I think about technology, I try and find a low common denominator, which is typically my parents. You know, I think most of us parents are that generation where they're not computer native, they're not mobile native, and to get, you know, for our parents who adopted technology is quite difficult. So, you know, I wouldn't even attempt to give my mother a ChatGPT account. You know, it would just be log on this and it's not working and why is this happening? However, you know, the next time I'm with my mother, I'm going to open her WhatsApp and say to her, if you have any questions, you know, this is a great port of call. So the friction's gone down. And then, you know, the other consideration, and this is a big consideration for a lot of enterprise businesses like yourself, is, you know, when ChatGPT came out, it was quite easy to just block ChatGPT. You know, we're now in a world where, you know, WhatsApp is a business tool. And, you know, AI tools are showing up natively inside business tools. You know, Office was the first one, but, you know, the horses run. You know, it's now in Instagram, it's now in WhatsApp, it's now in Facebook. So, you know, the world in which, and there were some prominent financial institutions who just blocked ChatGPT in the beginning, and there were countries, Italy as an example, banned ChatGPT in the beginning. That is no longer an option.
Yeah, of course, of course. But yeah, I mean that's ridiculous, isn't it? Exactly. It is. I think that it is ridiculous, and it's not an option, and it will continue to not be an option. You know what also is not going to make it an option is, it seems in the last, obviously the R&D has been happening for a lot longer, but it would seem in the last kind of 6 weeks that, you know, all the focus has been what's the mega build out for AI. It's the really big data centers, it's the big NVIDIA chips, it's a big power need. But it seems like there's been a lot of work that's been happening in parallel around edge computing or on the device computing, where there's chips that can go into a phone that can handle that type of thing, right? That is suitable for to run what I imagine would be low parameter models for now, but I'm sure there'll be improvements in it. And I think that's very, very interesting. And Apple, I'm sure, will lead the way in that. But then it's gone, right? Because then you can go and switch off a data center, or you can try and manage it. But once you put it into the device itself, I think you lose a complete, you know, the ability to regulate it to that degree is just not there any longer, you know.
Yeah, and very interesting. And I'm still trying to get my head around Apple's strategy. You know, they released a few models this week, from 400 million parameter models right up to, I think the big one was 8 billion parameter models. And, you know, these are naturally around their devices. So they're probably looking at backwards compatibility for some older iPhones around the 400 billion parameter mark. And I would imagine that with the right silicone, a new iPhone would be able to run a 3 billion parameter model. So what I'm trying to get my head around is, what is Apple's reason for open sourcing these models?
Because it's not their model. Their model is not open source.
No, and you know, the releasing models before that's shown up on their, you know, the one more thing, Apple, you know, in an Apple thing, you know, pulling out an iPad or pulling out a new device. This is completely contrarian to their approach. One thing I'm very sure of is Siri is going to be materially different after this year.
Exactly. And if you go to episode 2, that's what I said. I said when they do something, almost certainly it's going to be based in Siri, right? But it's, I mean, you don't have to be Nostradamus to kind of figure that out. It's a pretty obvious one. But just tell me more around the open sourcing that they're doing, because like, where's that showing up?
So it's showing up, so they're publishing papers. So they're actually publishing papers on their models, how they've written their models. They're making their code bases open source. So, you know, one of my theories is around privacy. So Apple's whole ethos around the iPhone has been your data, your privacy. So, how do you install a black box on an iPhone and stick to your privacy statement? You make it open source and you say, look, it's what Elon did with X when he open sourced the algorithm. Take a look at this. I've got nothing to hide.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but when you say they're open sourcing it, like, can somebody build it into, like, how? Because if it's based on their chips, like, I don't understand how they can open source it, because they have a chip specifically for it.
No, so they would optimize it for their chips, but my understanding is that the models, and I want to, I need to find some time. Last time I was in London with you, I showed you Llama 2 running on my MacBook. So I find a weekend with poor weather, and I'll download a few of these open source models and install them.
So so where do you get these Apple open source models? Where do you get them from? Hugging Face.
I would imagine now on Hugging Face. I haven't validated that, but I would imagine now on Hugging Face. The other thing that I saw, David, just as a proxy to where we are with AI. So Hugging Face a year ago had 200,000 models, and they've just hit 3 million in a year.
Models,
open source models.
But these models there must be some hereditary lineage between them. They can't be all unique models.
No, so there are probably a few hundred models that were trained from scratch, base models that were trained from scratch, and then then there's iterations of those. So a lot of them would be taking a fork and grounding it in coding or grounding it in language or whatever variant would come out of that.
What I would say is that you owe myself and our listeners of this podcast. You said you would come back to us. You tell us the measure by which a large language model should be judged. Remember? Do you remember I was saying, we hear these things, and the things that they do talk about, like, it's a 4 billion parameter, whatever. I think that is more. That's more like saying an engine's got 4 cylinders or 6 cylinders. I mean, that's all great. What does it actually do? What's the way of actually measuring it, right? Because the way you measure a car is on the speed it can get to. So not necessarily by its cylinders. So, I guess, are you ready to come and share your answer on this yet?
Well, I'm not because I'm not thinking about it. I'm not because it's such a nuanced topic. So, if we go to the origin of AGI discussions, and Alan Turing is really seen as the father of the concepts around AGI, and very famously he came up with the Turing test. And back in 1950 or 1960, when he came up with the Turing test, it seemed like a good measure. But what it turns out to now is it actually measures very little. The ability. And the Turing test very basically says that when you have a conversation with a computer, you shouldn't be able to differentiate it between a computer and a human being. So
we're long past that.
We're long past that. But then we and you did call it out. What is a useful test? And I'm doing research on this, and the reason I haven't come back is because it turns out to be very nuanced on what is a useful test for what application, and what are we measuring it against?
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, like, I was obviously kidding mainly in this. I mean, I was asking you because you said that you would find one, but that was more like in jest. I think from my side, the real reality is that there is no, the sector hasn't figured it out yet, right? The sector hasn't figured it out. It's not like there's this certainly that's in your shoulders, the responsibility. But I do think what it does show, and I think you're right. I think the answer to this will be based on the usage. I think it will be. It probably has to be on the usage. I think the other thing is that if you could get, the IQ test is probably quite a good one to do, and obviously, getting the equivalent of that, I think, would be useful, because once you have a large language model that has an IQ of 200, 250, the use of the models becomes quite specific. It becomes not specific, actually. The use of the models becomes very compelling. Because at the moment, I could ask ChatGPT something and some stuff it may give some useful answers, and other things I may know more than it, or my reasoning may exceed its reasoning. If that had an IQ of 250, what would be, under what circumstances would I make my own determinations and not use that, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that somehow being able to equate it to an IQ is going to be part of it, and then the rest of it is going to be specific. Like if you want an LLM to have an illegal application, what's its bar score, or whatever, and what's the and then also, what's its win rate in mock court or something like that. It'll be very specific to that sector.
Yeah, so I'm doing a research project at the moment for a client, and it really is around mainly call centers, and it really is, and at the core of this project is, what do people actually do? We know that people come to work, we know that work happens, but how much do we overestimate what productive work, measurable work that people do? And so much subjectivity in this, because if I to ask the average person, they believe they work 8 hours a day, but if I to do a time in motion study of that person,
3 hours,
hours at the absolute maximum. So now what I'm doing is I'm carving out that 3 hours work. Now, when I start doing an effort analysis on what that 3 hours work actually entails, a lot of it is forwarding an email, delaying something, giving a kicking the can down the road. So of those 3 hours, which we would say is demonstrable, measurable work, how much of that is truly productive work? How much of that on a productivity scale from 1 to 10 is productive? And I would give it a good go that it's less than an hour.
Yeah. I think some of those hours are seed hours that result in other things down the line, right? Because you could be doing research, you could be talking to someone, you could be building out your knowledge, you could be getting a better understanding of a situation, you could be reviewing past performance. So some of that, the actual productive hours that produce something require probably non-productive hours beforehand. So but I get your point. I do get your point.
What I challenge you on this, David, is, and this is the real the real step change that we're busy experiencing is, and we've both experienced this in digital transformation. And when I originally did digital transformation work, the first mistake that we made was, let's understand how a process is happening now, and let's get a system to do the process the same way our business as usual process is being done. And it turned out through many iterations that was the wrong approach, because that process was designed around humans. That process was an evolution of other processes. So we then went into a world of digital transformation. What would be the ideal digital way to do this process? A good example of this would be, when we did online ordering in the food industry. We didn't mimic the process of phoning a restaurant, speaking to a cashier, asking for the menu. We really looked at how we could reinvent that process. Go to a recent order, because we realized that customers order the same thing frequently. Go to a recent order, give the ability to edit that order, save payment, and really take that whole process and rethink that process. And the reason I think this is relevant is because if an AI is your research assistant, if your AI is doing all of these things that we classify as work, I think the opportunity is to rethink organizational design at a very, very fundamental level.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I think the more, yeah, exactly. I mean, the question becomes, well, what is the role that that a human would play in that, right? Because if you can have better reasoning, better analytical skills, better decision making, what's the and as we've seen, creativity, right? Because you go back 10 years, 5 years, say, well, go study the humanities and whatever else, because that's something that AI will never be able to compete on, and generative AI obviously turned that on its head. So I think there is that question. There is that question. Yeah.
Maybe then building on this analogy. So, you and I both did work in this space, so that's why I'm using it, but online ordering for the restaurant industry. When we did that well, we had customers basically go into riots when online ordering was down because the alternative was so poor. The alternative, phoning a store, the store was noisy, the person didn't understand your order, the person didn't understand where you lived, they got the order wrong, you weren't quite sure at the end of the transaction whether it happened the same way. And I suspect when we start automating business processes using AI in a sophisticated way, we're going to look back at team meetings and briefing teams and iterations, and we're going to see that as bloodletting.
So what will come in its place?
What will come in its place is the time difference between the ideation and how it actually shows up in the business is going to be mind-bogglingly quick. As two executives, one of my views is that a superpower of an executive is impatience. If we're not impatient, things will never happen. We need a level of impatience, and with that impatience comes frustration because of the pace at which things happen.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that when we've got AI agents acting on our behalf, iterate so quickly inside our businesses.
Yeah. Understood. Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, what's the trigger for that? The trigger for that would be, once you get AI models that can, I guess, exceed human IQ, right?
Absolutely. So there's a trust aspect to this, and again, using an analogy to digital transformation, the first time we started, when I started building processes to automate reconciliations of accounts or reconciliations of banks, almost always the CFOs I dealt with would run manual processes in parallel to that because the trust hadn't been built for that. So we need to go through a similar evolution where I need to run this. I need to run it as an assistant, and I'm going to validate it. But at some point, there's no enterprise client which is running a manual process to reconcile bank statements.
Of course.
Not viable anymore.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you wonder how many CEOs currently have the ability to truly grasp what's happening,
Well, and this is also where I have customers in different maturities in different markets, and we've got customers which are very, very mature, and they run great businesses, and we've got customers which are very immature and they run great businesses.
Yeah.
How this shows up and when it shows up, and I've respect for probably one of my most immature customers, an automotive customer. I have immense respect for the CEO because it's in his business. He runs his business. When they do a stock take, as an example, he's there on the weekend. really in the weeds of this business, and that's his superpower. And then I have people like yourselves, which I love working with, because you're thinking so far ahead, and you're willing to take on experimental projects, and we've got R&D projects, and we've got projects which are which ordinarily most enterprise customers wouldn't consider for years to come.
Yeah, we got really interrupted halfway through to my internet going down and then needing to run off and do a scan and all sorts of things. So yeah, here we are, day 2. One day wiser.
Location. You still in London? I'm back in Cape Town.
Yeah.
So good to continue our conversation.
Yeah, I think so. We're one day wiser than we were yesterday. So hopefully there's more to have. I think I was saying that lots was being spent on the metaverse. At some stage, the commercial case has to be found. And you said, well, you liked the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, and then I was about to come back with, yeah, but they was going to cost 45 billion to R&D, and then my internet went down. So I don't know if Zach maybe pulled the plug somewhere on us on that discussion. But I get your point. The glasses are good, but that's not 45 billion dollars worth of R&D. That's 10 mil or something less. So
I think that the nuance is that Zaki's post money, and he's a founder CEO, and he knows unlike a professional manager, he's now saying, well, what do the next 20 years of my life look like, and what do I want to be building on? And absolutely there's a responsibility as a public company to shareholders and your employees, but the alternatives aren't great. History doesn't speak terribly well to companies like Google and companies like IBM, who get complacent around their cash cows.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that makes sense. But who's not post money? And that's all the big institutional money that's out there that's invested in Meta, right? And I understand is a highly engineered share structure, special shares. He gets to call the shots. I get that.
But it's also a free market. The institutions, the nature of a free market is, the way they vote is they sell. If you don't like the strategy, you sell.
Yeah, sure. And then, they get downgraded in their ratings, and then their ability to borrow money is at its lowest, and it gets worse and worse, which is what happened to Boeing, by the way. When the door flew off that 737 MAX, the one of many things that have happened, they got downgraded, I don't know, it was Moody's or whatever, to their lowest investment grade. Now they just can't, how do you go to the market and raise money then? It becomes exorbitantly expensive if you can get it at all. I mean, that's a business that is burning through cash at the moment. And I was referencing them when I had all of our development teams together. I put up various examples. SpaceX 2013, SpaceX versus Boeing. Who's going to get to the International Space Station first, right? You look at 165,000 employees, 12,000 employees, 70 billion, 80 billion in turnover, no turnover, 100 and something years of experience and tech and engineering and everything else. And of course, the smart money would have been on Boeing. They got, they got double the investment that SpaceX did from NASA. And of course, we're broadly beaten. I mean, demolished, right? Not even close. Because even if I think on the 6th of May, they do their first manned space flight, or person space flight to the International Space Station. We be inclusive. And we really hope that goes well, right? Because that's people on board and whatnot. So I think it will, and I'm sure it will, and we hope it does. But they'll still be launching for more than double the cost of SpaceX's, because they're not landing boosters back down, and and so that goes to that point around. Well, I mean, there's 2 points there. One is, you get your strategy wrong. Investors do vote with their wallets, with their funds, I should rather say, and your ability to raise money and all that becomes more difficult. But also these big businesses that think like that, I mean, they're not well placed, are they?
They're not well placed, but one nuance, and your example of Boeing's a great example, is that by the time you're in trouble is not the time to be raising money, because that's the time the money is going to be the most expensive. The time to raise money is in good times, and the time to invest in a next generation technology is before your current generation technology is no longer popular. So you've got to, and I've got a slide here. I've been doing quite a lot of hitting the road, so I've been speaking to quite a few clients, and this is one slide that we put together, young Chris put together for me, and really what it talks to is that the value in a technology revolution is captured right in the beginning. If you look at IBM, IBM went through the heydays of mainframe computing, and they captured the market, they rode the market out, and then suddenly, in the early 90s, we're looking at like 91, 92, the floor just fell out from under them. Similarly, Microsoft ran the PC revolution, captured that market, and then suddenly in the early 2000s, Apple came into that market and captured it in a 3-year period. So values created in that 3-year period, and a guy like Zuck undoubtedly is busy saying, well, when do I capture the value? And I don't think we're in disagreement that he's early to the metaverse. He's definitely multiple years early to the metaverse. But then the question the question we should ask is, would you rather be too early, or would you miss the train? Would you miss the bus?
There's a third option.
Yeah.
The third option is the bus never comes, right? Because you asked the right question, but it assumes that the strategy is inherently right. It's the timing we're debating, right? Where you probably are right, but it's not a given, right? There is an assumption
not
there.
A given, yeah.
Albeit a strong argument that can be made for the assumption, But there is the third one. There is the third one, and the bus doesn't come, right? So you're early for the bus, you definitely catch it. You're late for the bus, and you don't catch it. Or there's no bus coming, and you waste a whole lot of time and resource waiting for it, right? It's about as far as that bus analogy is probably going to go. But that's, I think, really does, sum it up. And so you're in the former camp. You think it's coming. It's safe money, then. He's going to get there. Yeah, you're probably right, but I need to think about it more, And I'll tell you what concerns me about it is there, I would liken it to communism, not in any way because they're similar, but in human adoption, if you will, for a moment. Socialism or communism, or however you want, or where you want to go on the spectrum is probably not as relevant. But if we're thinking around the collective good, no inequality, everybody gets the same thing, etc. There's a lot to be said for that, right? You would have to be, in its principle, you would have to be quite mean of spirit to say that this wasn't, in fact, the way that humanity should go. The problem with it is that it doesn't suit human nature, because human nature is to strive for more and to be competitive and to do all of these things. So it was the wrong solution to the right problem, right? And then the other side of the corner is that side of the coin as well. Can capitalism get us there quicker because it lifts the bottom and everything else? And they'd be, that's a different debate. But let's just talk about the adoption side of it. A really, really good thing. You look at it, you say, how could it not go this way as we become more enlightened and everything else? And I wonder if there's a small adoption, a human spirit element to the metaverse as well, because the technology will be a defining factor, but it has to be embraced. Like, people have got to say that this is where I want to exist, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm giving up, because you can't do both, right? At that time that you're in the metaverse, you're not in this world.
Yeah, look, there's a subtlety here, and that's augmented reality. And I think the Ray-Ban Meta partnership for me is a lot more exciting than the Oculus Meta goggles.
I get you. And I think you're probably right. But this big, I don't have the numbers. You probably know better than I do. The lion's share of this 45 billion is not going into the augmented reality. It's going into building this world somewhere else, right? Like, that's the infrastructural cost and the development cost and the rules and the protocols and everything that go into this new world, right? So and it's my gut feel that that's what Zuck is betting on, is that's where people are going to go and live, right? But then it's a trade-off, because then you don't live in this world any longer. You live in that, and does that suit the human spirit, and do people want to do that? And that's I guess where a bit of my hesitancy comes in from.
No, and I'm not, I don't disagree with you. So, there's no certainty in the success of the metaverse. I'm a early adopter of VR technology. I've had a VR headset for a very long time, and it's got a long way to go. And I also think that it's highly antisocial. So if I had to steelman that, we've also got other contenders. We've got things like Neuralink. So will this actually be a wearable, or will this be a implant? So there's that. There's also a world in which socially we rebel against technology, and we do know every generation needs to define itself, and it's not impossible that a generation grows up and says, technology destroyed my parents' generation, or my brother and sister's generation. We're going to completely reject this technology.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, we have a visitor.
Nice.
Margaret.
Margaret.
Yeah, sure. But then I always think it's a different debate around. You see, I think there's the metaverse. This deep, dark online world. I'm sure it's not dark. I'm sure it's lovely. And then there's so that's the one thing. Is that going to be a thing or not? And then there's another question around, what is the form factor of computing, right? Because it was mainframes, it was personal computers, it was laptops, and then it was phones. And so now we're saying, so what is the form that this is going to take in the future? Is it going to be a wearable? Is it going to be an implant? And that's a different thing, right? I almost think that's a different thing. I think if Zuck was trying to figure that out, I'm sure he would solve it. I think what he's trying to figure out, where he's betting the majority, and of that 45 billion, 70% is going to go into the metaverse itself, the digital bricks and mortar, if you will, building that, and the rest are probably these peripheral things. But I just don't know. That your fancy headset, they've just cut production numbers for that, right? And already low production numbers. By Apple's side, it's like a rounding error. We know this. We discussed all this. They've cut production. What is that telling us? Is there something to read into that? Is it because there's a better one coming? I mean, what do you think?
I think that this is an atypical Apple strategy. I think that they needed to get the market excited. They needed to get the development community excited. And what we now have is, we've got this pregnant pause while the killer apps get developed, or the question mark around, what are the killer apps, and is the form factor right, is the price point right? So there are a whole bunch of unknowns and a whole bunch of headwind for this device. At the same time, you've got Meta open sourcing the Oculus operating system, which is built on Android. So we're going to see a whole bunch of hardware, both high-end hardware, medium and low-end hardware into the space. And then they also bought up a whole bunch of applications. They bought up a whole bunch of developers to stop those developers launching on Apple. So Apple's not without its own headwind.
Yeah, sure. The high barrier to the cost of entry of that device currently, but also the knock-on effect of that is that the developers know that the universe of consumers who are going to own that is going to be smaller. So you're going to go and develop for an Apple Watch, which is probably the best-selling watch in the world, maybe, or are you going to go and do expensive development, because it's ridiculously expensive development, I would imagine, because it's visual and it's graphical and all sorts of things, and it's so unknown, right? You're building it as you go. So you're going to go and develop for the Apple Watch, or you're going to go and develop for that, right? You're going to develop for the iPhone, which is in every single person's hands, or many, many people's hands, or you're going to go and develop for a device that is questionable. So I think the very thing that it needs for its survival is probably at risk itself. Is not a sure thing.
No, it's not a sure thing, and it's not even a sure thing that either Meta or Apple will capture this market. If we go back to the smartphone market, the dominant players in the early 2000s, Palm, Nokia, Sony, a whole bunch of players, are no longer the players today. So if history's got anything to go by, it's more likely that a startup will capture the next generation than an incumbent.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, exactly. And where is it actually leading? You got the rivers in the ocean. Like, do all these rivers find the ocean? I think is the question I would ask. But tell me about your lived experience with it. I mean, you've had it for 3 months now, is that right?
Yeah, I've probably had it for 2-3 months. To be very honest with you, I've probably spent less than an hour on it, at the moment. And it's not, it's because I've been busy. I've got a lot happening. And I've also, the research project I want to do, I need the Meta Ray-Ban, and that's been delayed for various reasons. So
right, okay. Because I know you're doing a piece of work for us as to where you think all of these things can come, and because you obviously have the Oculus already, or what are they called now?
The Oculus Meta Pro. So this is this device over here.
Yeah, I don't think they call it Oculus any longer. I think they've dropped that naming convention on the new ones. But anyway, exactly, because you got the Meta, then you have the other Meta one, the Ray, and then because I know you're doing this piece of work for us. I'm sure the SOW is somewhere in my inbox, which I'll go look for. I mean, obviously, we're very excited to see what you think that these things could do for us. So, obviously, the lowest cost of entry would be the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, but those are more capturing than feedback. You've got those new, whatever they call Oculus. You've got obviously the Apple Vision Pro. What about what's the Microsoft product called?
Oh, the HoloLens.
Yeah, quite expensive as well, I think.
I think it's more of a commercial application. I think that, they looked at this space and, there are 2 strong commercial applications. The one is a company called Magic Leap. Very well-funded startup. A bunch of players, big tech players, including Amazon, put some serious money into them. Their promise was to launch a consumer product, but they realized that the market wasn't big enough to justify, or the market wouldn't pay what they needed to them to pay. So they're in industrial, and then my understanding is HoloLens is also in industrial. Sony also have a PlayStation, a VR PlayStation, which is really focused on gaming.
Right. Okay. Look, what I would go back to is, I mean, your interest and passion for technology is a 9 out of 10 or something similar to that, right? You got one of the most anticipated products to be released, potentially groundbreaking, and you spend an hour on it in 2 to 3 months. There's no criticism of you. This is an indictment of the product. Yeah.
No, it's not lost on me. It's if the use case was that compelling and the killer apps were there, I wouldn't put it down. The fact is, I've just done 2 days on the road, flying and long flights and difficult flights, and the feedback I've got from the market is that this makes flying a far more pleasurable experience, and it didn't even pass my mind to take it with on this trip.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe longer trips. Maybe when you're flying longer, you'll have a look at it. But anyway, let's see. I mean, it could be interesting. I think I'm more convinced than I was when we first discussed this, that this is not the answer. We may get there, but this is not the answer. Somebody that we also give a meeting to every week or so is obviously Google. And the first half of this, we discussed that Google, and obviously they had come out with their first quarter results, which were outstanding, like 15-16% rise in revenue. Like, the market loved it. So of their, call it 80 billion that they did in revenue, 61 in advertising. About the remainder, half of it came from cloud, and the other half came from other things, which would be, I don't know, like their phones and whatever else, I guess, right?
YouTube, so
No,
you know
YouTube
that
wasn't advertising.
was
So
it in
YouTube,
advertising? Okay.
yeah. So of the 62 from in advertising in total, about 8 or 9 came from YouTube, which was up from 6.7 the previous year. So massive growth there. And we're seeing this too, connected TV and whatever. I mean, we're busy looking at how we go and capture this new connected TV advertising, where you don't want to spend £300,000-400,000 to produce an advert. Like, we're looking for agencies looking internally using new technology. How do you get these pieces out quickly? Same quality, production quality, and into connected TV world, land. Clearly it's growing. We had anticipated it, and you can see it in those results.
Yeah, for me, I think that's where, and supporting an influencer, if done poorly, and it's often done poorly, I think is a very poor approach. But I think I've seen examples of affiliations with influencers which are done well. But I think that the underlying challenge with Google is, and Google historically has had a great business, but the underlying challenge with Google is that they everything runs off one line of business, and regardless of everything else. If Google had to lose that one line of business, the organization would implode. And
advertising,
search advertising. Yeah. So
in fact,
everything else is funded.
The two are connected. The second biggest search engine in the world?
No.
YouTube.
Yeah. Okay. So there we have it. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
The challenge is that YouTube won't support Google. YouTube as a business will not support the glass and aluminium and big offices and DEI campaigns and all the stupidity.
Yeah, we got to DEI. There we go. Yeah. Okay, good. This was about an hour, maybe more than that. Well done.
Yeah.
It won't. But yeah, exactly. And the free granola bars and the massage pods and the
100%. Executive rest and vest strategies that a lot of people on their payrolls have, and all the do good kind of things. So the truth is that they've got effectively one cash cow inside their business, and for the first time in history, that cash cow has real challenge. You've got the likes of Perplexity, which is a direct competitor, and then you've got indirect competitors in the form of OpenAI, Meta, and all the other LLMs.
Exactly. You put an LLM where somebody uses it, and you connect it to the internet, like, it's over, right? Yeah. And that's where Meta is very, very smart. The market, the market gave them a bit of a bloody nose with these last results, and I can understand some of it, but their core strategy is not wrong, because you have all of these users on Instagram and Facebook. You put an LLM, then you connect it to the internet. Like, why would you not use that to search, specifically when these things get better and better, as we said, whatever that measure may be? That's the big issue to me. You put it into WhatsApp, like, if you can Google, I'm even using the term Google as a verb. If you can go in and find what you want in the internet from an LLM, it's going to give you better quality results and everything else in a way that you're already there. But look, it's
a game. It's not over for them, but it is a game of attrition. If we had to say that we've got a bunch of direct contenders for search in the form of Perplexity and OpenAI, and those, maybe those contenders are taking less than 5% market share. But then we have, the embedded LLM, so the Microsoft Copilots, the Meta, WhatsApp integrations, if those take another 5 or 10%, and then the on-device LLMs, the iPhone LLM comes in and takes 20% market share, suddenly then the whole market has changed.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you wouldn't need much contraction for that in the Google business for it to be a very, very big deal, But your and my team were with them this week. I couldn't be there. We had our board, but I wanted to go, but unfortunately couldn't. And we've got some pretty specific use cases that we wanted to see what they could do. specifically around data, customer data, and whatnot. And what came back, I mean, the teams came back. I don't know from your side, but from my side, they came back very positive. I think only on one of the use cases, they thought on one of the, I think attrition or whatever it might have been, they thought there could be some very, very interesting things they could do there. And was that what you heard as well?
I haven't had feedback. I've been out. I've been on the road this whole week. So yeah, I'll touch base with the team. But there's no doubt, every time you and I have been in a room with Google, the promise has been really good, and they put smart engineers in the room. My experience has been on the follow-up. When you've actually asked them to demonstrate value.
Yeah.
That's the challenge. And then, the undeniable elephant in the room is the data gravity. And the majority of enterprises have no data gravity heading towards the Google data center. All the data gravity is headed towards a Microsoft data center. And, you've got the leader in that space. If you look at Gartner, if you look at IDC, you look at any of the analyst reports, Power BI is by a country mile the leader.
Yes. I think that's right. But what we do know is that the world changes very fast in this at the moment.
Yeah.
These language models get better. What's the big step change? Because no one has step change beyond GTP multimodal GPT-4 multimodal is probably the gold standard. When they say it beats it at this and beats it at that, I don't know if holistically it does.
And if there's always a compromise, it's a context window is not as long, terms and conditions apply every time I've seen one of those.
Yeah, exactly. So two things I would say. One is that, even if they are better, it's marginal. I mean, it's not huge at the moment. When that big next one comes, the GPT-4 type, as that, how good that was when it came out, the next kind of real naming convention up, I think it has the opportunity to be quite disruptive. But there's also a lot of the focus seems to be on the trading at the moment, But once these models are trained and you've got chips that they can run on edge and on devices and all that, the world changes again a little bit then as well, right? Because I suppose you'll always be training them and there'll always be an arms race there, but it's different from the use of them. It's when we use these models, we don't need the world's biggest, data centers. We go and carve out a specific part of it, but it's very manageable. I think it seems the compute required for using them is a lot less than for managing them, is my very limited understanding of it.
No, and your thinking is spot on. There's fit for purpose, and deploying capital for vanity metrics is irresponsible. So the job the job that we have, myself in an advisory capacity and unit capital allocation capacity, is to allocate and advise that the capital gets allocated to the most appropriate use case. And this is also the challenge of a company like OpenAI is they've arguably spent a few $100 million to be first to market with GPT-4. And then being a fast follower and a company who had to take a Llama 3 model now would be on parity from a technology or close to parity with OpenAI with a model that they can get for free.
Yeah.
So the question comes, and this is also the illusion. One of the illusions I often see in innovation is that people believe innovation won't stop.
Yeah, but, exactly.
And that's how we got into the dot-com bubble. Everybody thought, innovation around the internet won't stop. But the internet materially hasn't changed. We've got social and we've got things like that. But e-commerce, the act of doing e-commerce, a catalog served online with payment and logistics and visibility and information. Broadly, we've got slightly more sophisticated around that. Materially, it hasn't changed. And there's a great school of thought to say, well, we are getting to the point of diminishing returns using transformer technologies and large language models
in their current guise.
in their current guise. So,
and it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Once they get significantly smarter, it changes completely. Because then who do you go and ask? You go and ask your chief legal officer, or do you go and ask your legal GPT? Like once it's got an IQ and an EQ of 200 or an IQ of 250, 300, 400, 700, whatever it might be, who would you ask?
Yeah, look, I was with an executive this last week who employs 300 software developers, and their view to me was that they actually can't deal with the egos anymore in their software development team. And for them,
rock stars,
exactly, religious, borderline religious figures, and for them, the promise of AI was more
come fast enough. Yeah,
exactly. It's exactly that.
Yeah. Look, the market is changing, though. I think the ability to, it will never change completely for them. We're going to market for some key roles at the moment. I don't know if I mentioned this, but we're seeing like 40 applications when 2 years ago we'd see 5. So there's definitely a bit of heat has come out of the market, and that population of people is definitely not having it all their own way. However, this is a momentary drift. The direction of travel until there is a technological piece that does something differently, I think is probably not going to. The direction of travel is going to stay the same until it gets disrupted by that. At the moment, it's getting disrupted by an economy that's got a bit of headwinds, but that's cyclical. We know that. The question is there a bigger disruption where it's got to be coming? I mean, GPTs can code already. They can't do all the things that a good coder can do yet.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. But to comment on your point around the recruitment market or the talent market, what I'm seeing with our position and we're doing a significant amount of our revenue in AI at the moment, and the caliber of people that I'm interviewing. I've just recruited a woman, a chemical engineer, went to one of the most prestigious universities in South Africa, did a postgrad at MIT, 10 years work experience, and she's left a major brand, a multi-billion-dollar organization to join me because she sees the future of her career in AI.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So we've got some really smart people, and I do think, part of the...
Are we going to meet her? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. One of the, I specifically recruited her for the supply chain conversation that we're having.
Yeah, sure.
She did her undergrad in manufacturing, and she did, So I think she would be a great fit for your organization.
Okay, good. Well, I look forward to meeting her. When does she join?
1st of June.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, soon. Very good. Okay, good. So, Tony, I think that's almost bringing us up to our time. What do you got plans? What's on your dance card these days? What are you looking at? How are you spending your time? We know it's not in the metaverse with your what are they called? Vision Pros.
Yeah. At the moment, I'm spending a lot of time on my hard enduro motorbike. There's a big race in South Africa, Lesotho, called the Roof of Africa.
Right. Yes.
About 300 people enter it, and less than 50% of them finish. And just the kind of personality I have is I need a big physical challenge. And this is my big physical challenge for the year. So spend a bit of time on the motorbike. We've got a couple of bank holidays next week, so I'm taking some time off and I'm going up into Lesotho.
All right. And that will be in practice for that, right? So when is the actual race, do you say?
The actual race is in November.
November.
And and I'm finding also, David, the community is such a big deal, and I'm always struck by the like-mindedness that, you know, gets attracted to these things. So, you know, I've really found an incredibly rich community in the
Mm,
hard enduro people.
nice.
Yeah.
And good people.
Great people, you know, great people, you know, that's challenging, you know, there's camaraderie because we're all suffering together.
Yeah.
You know, there's a
Yeah.
whole bunch of filters just to get there, just to
Mm.
start the bike and get it through a riverbed. So a really rich community.
Nice. Okay. Well, that's cool. That's cool.
How about yourself? You've got some travel coming up, some exciting travel.
Not really. I think the trip is just going to be an in and out for 2 days. It looks like so that's changed quite a bit. But interestingly, tomorrow as you know, we're sponsoring a British touring car
Oh
championship
yeah.
driver. So the first race of the season tomorrow at Donington. So we'll be there with the factory team as their guests, obviously doing the pit walks, and apparently you can watch. I mean, we're not insignificant sponsor, but we can watch from the garages, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So we'll see what that's like tomorrow. But yeah, all going well. And off to the ballet this afternoon, which is perhaps less fun, but I'm sure we'll be good. Yeah,
Yeah. Look,
got
I
to be
think
done, right?
it's got to be done. And, you know, living in a big city like London, you know, the access to art and culture is
Yeah,
you know, you know, top 5 in the world. So yeah,
yeah. You got to do it
got to
exactly.
do it.
All right, nice one, Tony. Well, we will catch up in a week's time, and
Thank you,
we'll be
David.
1 week wiser. We'll see what we have then. All
Always
right,
good
man.
connecting. Cheers.